The control center of a WordPress site can be found under the Settings tab on the left-hand side. From here, you can control everything from what the site is called and how it shows up in search engines, to who can view and comment on different posts and how the front page is displayed. Although there are a lot of settings in a WordPress site, they're pretty straightforward and easy to understand, and now we're going to go through a couple of them. To get to the settings, we go to the bottom of the left-hand panel and select General. This is the general settings for the site, and this is where things like the site title, the tagline, the email address associated with the site, and the time zone, and so on are stored. By default, WordPress will assign the name of the site that you assign to the site as the site title, but it doesn't get a tagline until you put it in. So unless you change the tagline, it'll always be just another WordPress blog. So I recommend you go into Settings, General, and change it to a tagline that matches what your site's going to be about. In this case, it's going to be news about what's happening at Samoka. You should also change the time zone so that the time zone corresponds to where you are. The time zone is important because you can schedule posts to be released at a certain time, but if the time zone is wrong, it'll look like it was scheduled earlier or later. The easiest way of setting the time zone, if you don't know your own time zone, is to simply type in the name of a city close by. Like for instance, now we're in Ventura, California, so we're close to Los Angeles. So if I spell Los Angeles, I get that as an option. You can also set the date format and time format, and even the day the week starts on, from Monday to Sunday or whatever, and the language. Now, when I say language, I don't mean the language of the website you're looking at right now. I mean the language you're going to be writing in. So if you're writing in English, leave it at English. If you're going to write posts in French, then change it to French. This is important because the browsers, when they visit the site, they want to know what language the content is written in. Not just the browsers, the search engines and Facebook and all these other services, they all want to know what the language is. And if the language code is wrong, then you'll get indexed wrong and the browsers will be informed about the wrong language. So set it to the language you're going to be writing in, not the language the user interface is going to be in. When I made changes, I have to click Save Changes so that the changes are saved. And then I'll also go and add a blog picture or icon. This matters on WordPress.com because every now and again, WordPress wants to put your site in an index or link to it or use a little avatar to point to the site. And that's what this picture is. So upload a picture that you think is going to work. I'm going to choose the square one and click Upload Image. When you do, you get taken to a cropper that helps you crop the image to the correct size. After you crop it, you click Crop Image. You get to see the preview of the images. And then you can go back to the blog options again. Under General, you have Writing. Writing is about the actual writing process in WordPress. And there are not that many options here. The ones that matter are the size of the post box. Now, this is a common question. How do you change the default size to the post box? It's done here. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll show you. If I go to Posts and I create a new post, directly under Title, we have this big box here where we're going to write all our content. That's the post box. And by default, it's set to 20 lines of text, which means if I write here, I'll end up with 20 lines of text. I can change the size by grabbing it down here, but I want to have it at a default size that makes sense. So if the 20 lines is too small, I can go here under Writing Settings and change that to something else. You can also change the formatting, so it changes the emoticons to actual graphics and fixes broken HTML. And you can set the default post category to something other than uncategorized if you want to. Below it, you have Press This, which allows you to add a bookmarklet to your browser so that when you find something interesting, you just click on that bookmarklet and you automatically get brought to WordPress so you can write a post about it. And at the bottom, you have Post by Email, which allows you to email your site, and then whatever you email to the site automatically gets published. Below Writing, we have Reading. Reading is about how people see the site when they visit it. At the top, you have the ability to change what the front page displays. By default, it'll display a standard blog, which is a reverse chronological order of your most recent posts. However, in some cases, you want the front page to be a static page with static content, and then you want some other page to be the blog page. If that's the case, you make two new pages, one that's actually the front page that has your front page content on it, and another one that is an empty page that just serves as a placeholder for the blog. Once you've done that, you can go to Front Page Displays, change it to a static page, and then select a page for the front page and a page for the post page. If you don't select a page for the post page, there will be no blog page available on your site. That may be what you want, or it may not be what you want. So you have to make that decision on your own. Below that, you decide how many posts are going to be displayed on the post page and in your feed, whether or not your feed will display the full text or just a summary of your content, and whether or not your feed should contain categories, tags, and comment count. Below that, you have settings for people who follow your site. So if they subscribe either to your site as a whole, or if they subscribe to a thread of comments, so they really want to participate in a discussion, but they don't want to sit on the site, they can get it by email. This is all set here, where you also write the welcome text for people who either follow your site as a whole at the top, or just a comment. So you may want to look through this text to make sure it matches what you want, or you may want to customize it so that it becomes more personal. The next option on the list is discussion. This allows you to control the commenting on your site. And this is something that is quite important if you want to have a vibrant community around your blog. You need to allow people to comment on your site, but at the same time, you want to kind of moderate the commenting so it doesn't get too harsh. And you may also want to control how it's displayed so you don't get too many comments on one page. All that is done here. A common question I get a lot is, how do you turn commenting off? Well, the easiest way of turning commenting off is to go to the top on discussion settings under default article settings and unchecking number 3 here, which says allow people to post comments on new articles. If you uncheck it, then no one can post comments on new articles unless in that article you've specifically said that that article can have comments, because each of these 3 top settings can be overridden for individual articles. The rest of the comment section is pretty straightforward. You have comment settings that allow you to do things like demand the author must fill in a name and email if they're not logged into WordPress.com. You can say how many threaded levels you have in each comment row and how many comments are displayed on each page and so on. Underneath there, you have the email settings, which set how often you get emails and what situations will generate emails from your site to you telling you about new comments. And you can do things like demand that an administrator must always approve a new comment every time it's posted, or confirm that the commenter has already had one comment approved previously. Below the email settings, you have comment moderation and comment blacklist. This is a great way of filtering out garbage in comments, because comment spam is the new spam. So when you put a website on the internet, it'll get tons of crap comments that are basically just there to either take over your site or to just advertise something. And it's easy to filter this out by putting in things like specific words you don't want to appear in comments, specific URLs they can come from, or IP addresses, or even email addresses. What's important here is the distinction between moderation and blacklist. If you put a word or an IP address or an email on the moderation list, it means every time a comment comes in containing one of these, it'll go into the moderation box, which means you have to actively approve the comment before it displays on the site. However, if you put that same information in the blacklist, the comment will simply be deleted. It will never be published no matter what you do, and you don't have to do anything about it. At the very bottom, you have settings for avatars. Now, you remember the gravatars that we created early in the course? Well, this is where they kick in. When people comment on your site, you can choose to not show or show the gravatars attached to that user. By default, you show gravatars, and you can even activate something called hover gravatars, which means when people hover over a gravatar, you automatically get this pop-up with more information about that user. And you can set things like the maximum rating for the gravatar, so you only display G-rated gravatars, and you can pick what the default gravatar should be. I personally like the mystery man, so I'm going to activate the mystery man. At the very bottom, you have comment form. This relates to a specific function inside WordPress.com, which allows you to make a comment form. And if you change that, leave a reply to something else, it'll change the comment form button. When you made your changes, click Save Changes. The final item on the settings list I want to focus on is privacy. If you click on privacy, you see at the top here, you have 2 options. Allow search engines to index this site, or ask search engines not to index this site. You'll remember from when you set up the site originally that you had this option. This basically allows you to tell search engines whether or not you want to be indexed or not. And it's important for one particular reason. If you're setting up a new site and you are going to populate it, but you haven't done it yet, or you're in the process of populating a site, it might be a good idea to turn search engine indexing off. Simply because as you're moving forward, you may mess up the content or publish content that is not going to be there for all time, or something like that, and you don't want that to be indexed and then people follow the index links and then they end up somewhere where there's nothing. But once you're done with that and you publish content you want other people to find, you should always set it to allow search engines to index the site, with one exception. If you're publishing content that you only want a specific group of people to access, then you go down here and you say, I'd like my site to be private, visibly only to users I choose. If you do that, you can create a list of invited guests that can see your site, and for the rest of the world, your site will be invisible. For our intents and purposes, you should set site visibility to the top option. Allow search engines to index this site, because that way we can use all the sharing features that are included inside WordPress.com. Looking at the settings tab, you see that there are several other options. You have polls and ratings, domains, email post changes, and so on and so on. And I encourage you to click on them and look over what's there. And if you're confused, click on the help tab, which is related to the page you're looking at, so you understand it. But I've covered the most basic options that are most important.